Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Thomas McGonagle, and welcome to K8sKoach, our first StreamCast. And today I have with me one of my formal mentors and one of the best coaches I know, and it's Mike Eckhoff. And it's just a pleasure to see you, Mike. Thank you for being on.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm excited to see you again and happy to be on the show.
And so, really, what I wanted to discuss with Mike today, and who I mentioned is one of my formal mentors, is coaching, right? And the importance of coaching and how to be a coach, right? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be a coach. And by the way, that's coach with a K, Mike, because of Kubernetes, K8sKoach, right? And Mike and I worked together. He was the chief revenue officer at Armory, and I was one of his solution architects. And through that relationship, he became a formal mentor of mine. And I've just always been so darn impressed with your coaching capabilities and your mentorship capabilities. And I know I've shared this story with you once before, but at the beginning of my career, I had a mentor and a coach and a manager that was just off the charts in terms of skill. And he was he, believe it or not, he ran the FAA's air traffic control management facility. So he was the biggest big shot at Logan, right? And then he retired, and then he came and worked on this government contract that I was working on. And there was this terrible situation, and there was this employee, this woman that was under severe stress and problems at home, and she needed some time off, and they arranged for this meeting for her, and and she came in and just completely wigged out and freaked out. It was too much for her. And then this guy John, his name was John Butler, JB. Excused the whole room, right? So he made HR leave the room, and I kid you not, Mike. And I know I've told you this story before, but he turned her around in 30 seconds. Like, he made her feel better, and he made her feel, and she left freely, and she knew she could come back, and there wasn't a problem, and he had that much empathy, and people talk about emotional intelligence, but it was something I was hoping we could kind of dig into today. But I consider, truly, I consider Mike to be at that level, and I just mean that with the biggest compliment, because JB was just such an amazing person, and or excuse me, he is. He is an amazing person. And so I don't want to put that out there, but I
Yeah,
just
let's
wanted
not
to share
terminate
that.
him too quickly.
He's doing good. He's doing really good. He's doing really well. Yeah. And so I just wanted to start off with that. And if I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike, and just how much I appreciate you being on, and if you wouldn't mind giving yourself kind of an introduction, that'd be great.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, happy to give an introduction. And I do want to follow up on that story because it's such a perfect example of coaching and how to actually show that empathy. But I'm a sales guy, right? At the end of the day, that's what I do. I've done sales all my life. I was doing sales before I knew I was doing sales. Putting myself through college, working in retail stores. I always tell people, usually in interviews, that I perfected the art of the puppy dog close by selling puppy dogs. And it's a real simple process. You got these little meet and greet rooms. Somebody's looking at a dog, here, check it out, especially if they've got kids. You put them in there and then you leave, and you just don't come back. And you just let them sit there and play with that dog until they're so happy that they can't possibly walk out of the store without buying it. But it's just
Dangerous
kind of a
job.
natural
Jeez.
thing to do. Exactly,
No,
but it
that
was fun.
that's true.
And
That's
that to
terrific.
me is what sales is, right? Sales is fun when you're doing it right, and when you focus on the fun and you focus on the people, and you listen and you show empathy. That's what makes sales an interesting career, and what makes it a great life to have. And now I'm at the point in my career where I'm doing fractional sales work, which means I'm helping several different companies kind of build out their go-to-market plans, their processes, hiring salespeople, coaching sales leaders that they have in place. And so coaching is kind of a daily part of my life, whether it's in my business and professional world, with my friends, with mentors, mentees. But it's something that I'm very passionate about. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thanks, Mike. So I think the perfect place to start is this is gonna be the inverse of probably the most obvious question. What makes a good coach, right? It's what makes a bad coach, right? So if we could maybe start with there. If do you have any thoughts on that? I know that's kind of a hard question, but
Honestly, it's actually probably one of the easiest questions you could ask because everybody knows the answer, right? You may not be able to define it and put it in words, but when you have someone who's trying to coach you and it's not resonating, you don't see the value of what they're doing. They're talking about themselves as opposed to talking about you. you know very clearly that that person is not a good coach. Or they might be an excellent coach, but they're not a good coach for that particular scenario. And I think your example in FAA was a perfect one, because in that particular environment, what JD, right? You said it was JD?
JB, Butler,
JB.
JB. Yeah.
What JB did, and I don't have to, I wasn't in the room. That's the first time I've ever heard this story, but it's so clear what he did was, one, he stopped and understood the person who needed coaching, whether they knew it or not. He listened to what they were saying. He felt that empathy, and he established an environment that was conducive to coaching. In that case, somebody who's emotional, you don't want a bunch of people around. So it's clear the room, right? Get everybody out of the way, and focus on that person. And he probably didn't have to say much to her, because just that act alone shows that he was listening, that he had empathy, that he understood the situation that she was in. And so I come back to your question of what makes a bad coach. Well, it's someone who doesn't understand either the person, the environment, or the situation. And if you're not focused on that, then you're trying to coach someone who's not in a position where they're able to receive coaching.
So, what's coming up for me, and first of all, I love your answer, and I love the analyses, right? The spot on analysis. But what I really connected with very, very quickly is, it's about time and place for the coaching, right? So in the Kubernetes world, the best time to coach someone on their Helm chart utilization, or their Helm chart skills, is not during an emergency, right? When their hands are shaking, it's not during that. It's at another point, right? So knowing when and where to coach is really,
Yeah.
really a key aspect of it, right?
And in sales coaching, it's the exact same story. Coaching a salesperson when they're trying to close a deal and the deal's going sideways doesn't really help, right? You focus on solving the problem, then you can go back and say, what could I have done differently early in the process to avoid this situation from happening? And one of the companies that I worked with was a European firm, and they had a very different approach to crisis management. And they were very open about it. They said, the first thing that you do in a crisis is you figure out who's to blame. And he said, you Americans do it completely differently. When you have a crisis, you fix the problem first, and then you worry about how to make sure the problem doesn't happen again. There's no blame in the equation, right? And if you're trying to assign blame or tell someone what they did wrong, that's not coaching.
Oh my, that's fascinating. It's like a coach first crisis management um, approach. And so, in your
Mhm.
impression of these types of crises that you observed, was it superior? Did you find it markedly better, or markedly worse?
To solve the crisis first. Oh,
Or no,
absolutely.
no,
And
no,
again,
I'm sorry, to like have that coaching crisis first mentality, as
mhm.
opposed to like the blaming the person, or you
Oh,
know,
absolutely. I mean, it fundamentally changed the company, and it wasn't just me; it was other people in the organization that took that approach. But that mentality is a limiter in terms of people development and people skills, because you're not building the person up. You're not giving them the confidence that next time they're going to actually review that Helm chart before they try to
right,
deploy. They're not going to, they're going to worry about what happens if I make a mistake, as opposed to how do I make sure I do this to the best of my ability.
right. I mean, coming up for me is some of the crises I've been involved with throughout my career. And, I was in operations before I got into solution architecture. And, the first thing that came up for me is, instilling that ability to, like in DevOps, people talk about a lot, but there's like a cord in the Toyota production line that anyone can pull, and no one's going to get in trouble if there's a problem, if there's a defect, if there's a noticeable bolt missing, or what, and like having that. I'm bungling the word. It's like a Hadon cord or something. It's a word like that. And having this ability for everyone to be, this ability to stop what's going on, regroup, and then keep moving forward. I just love that.
Yeah, I
Kind
mean,
of.
it's such a good example, because when you think about it, right, coaching is about confidence. It's about building up a person so that they are confident in their own abilities and in their ability to, deliver in whatever role or whatever position you've put them in. And if you're blaming them for doing something wrong, that's degrading their confidence. It's destroying confidence. So giving them the autonomy and the authority to say, hey, stop the process line. If something's wrong, take that, pull the cord and
Right.
stop the process line and we'll figure it out. And that power, that authority builds confidence.
Absolutely. And so, once again, I'm really connecting with what you're saying. And so, the purpose of coaching, I'm paraphrasing what you just said, but the purpose of coaching is building confidence, right? And I can't think of a better takeaway from this, StreamCast, right? It's we as coaches and we as aspiring coaches should be trying to instill as much confidence in our coachees, or what is the correct noun? Students, pupils, like what I mean,
I think
customers,
of
clients,
yeah, I think of a mentor mentee relationship.
mentee, yeah,
But ultimately, I come back to that point, which is, coaching is about the person receiving coaching more than it is about the person giving coaching,
right.
right? And you've got to understand what position that person is in and what state that person is in
And where
before
they
you
want to
start
go,
giving them
right?
coaching.
What do they want to
Mhm.
do, right? Oh yeah, perfectly. But but for me, something that keeps bubbling up, and I know in our pre session we talked about it, is for me, I have this very kind of sports coaching concept of coaching, right? And that's from so I played football for 8 years, and then I cross trained in all these other sports. Primarily football was my primary sport, and that's a highly coached sport. I mean, to the point where it's almost like the coach is giving the chess moves, right? And then then you as the athlete are supposed to, you as the football player are supposed to kind of make them happen, right? And as part of this preparation for this talk, I was going through something. There's actually some really nice coaching books for for example, offensive linemen on Amazon. And so I was going through some of those blurbs and some of those. I was kind of doing some research. And there's skill development, right? There's the actual tactical, there's the actual strategic, right, stuff. There's all that stuff kind of goes into it. But in our pre-session, we were talking about coaching, sports coaching as an approach, or as an analogy for sales coaching, for example, or Kubernetes coaching, for example. And then just to remind you, I do have it, and I can share it if you want to go through it. You brought up very quickly the lasso way. So if it's okay with you, I'll just share it. As part of I'll present it as part of our screencast, and I'll make the document available to everyone who's watching, so they can find it as well. But here's the lasso way. Can you read it? Is it too minimal?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, I can
Mhm,
see it well.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, for
Um,
those that aren't familiar, obviously the TV show Ted Lasso was about this American college football coach that gained some notoriety because of his passionate response in a locker room that got video airplay, and was brought in, um, as a well, with a little. I don't want to give away the series if you haven't seen it, but was brought in to coach a UK football team. In other words, a soccer team, right? The real football. And his style and his approach was really designed around this concept of how to be a coach. And I loved it so much that I started writing down things about it, and I thought I'd do a podcast. And then, like most other things, I figured out somebody else had already done it, so I just found it on the internet and copied it. But a couple of things that you brought up there that I thought were really interesting, is this idea that obstacles can be opportunities, right? It's not about solving and coaching in the moment. It's about learning from those experiences so that you can do something better the next time around. And it's about really being understanding and being a mentor and being able to say, as a person on the team, you are there to help coach your peers, whether you're the captain of the team or you're the first person on the team. Your attitude and your approach is everything, and that's going to drive how other people react. And I think one of the most common, or one of the most obvious themes in the series, is the idea that if someone doesn't want to be coached, then you're not going to get through to them until something causes them to actually change their attitude. And that can be your actions, it can be you showing vulnerability, It can be, some type of a traumatic event. It can be someone else talking to them. But until someone is ready to be coached, anything you do is not going to change their behavior.
So that, it comes up from the what you just said is, what can we, first of all, like this idea of mentorship and menteeship. I encountered it early on in my career that, and it was at Booz Allen Hamilton. They were like, you have to have a mentor. No matter what, you have to have a mentor. They're not going to help you get a mentor, but you have to have a mentor. And I've never really kind of seen that in any other organization. But they are very mentor mentee focused. But kind of the inverse of. Or no, how do you be a good coachable mentee? Being open to it just seems kind of trite to me. But there's got to be other qualities that a good mentee. Is there something that you look for? First of all, you're my mentor, and so is there anything I can do to be a really, really good mentee?
Well, I think first of all, you've been through enough environments, especially with your sports background, that you understand what it means to be coached, right? And there are times when a coach needs to yell at you and tell you to stop doing something or doing something a different way. And if you're able to accept that and receive that, then that can be a very effective style. There's other times when a coach has to, be very supportive and encouraging and trying to get you to recognize an ability that you may already have or you may not be effectively utilizing. To me, it all comes down to that relationship. And I was very lucky early in my career to have a old grizzled sales guy who started out selling unfinished furniture and sold copiers. And I'm sure 80% of your audience doesn't even know what a copier is anymore. But when you used to actually go sell those to businesses, then with telephone systems, and that's where we worked together. And he came in with this air of experience and knowledge, and I wanted to learn from him. And I came to him and said, hey, help me understand how this works, right? I was asking for it. There have been other times when people come in with this arrogance and attitude, and I don't want to be anywhere around those people. So as a someone looking for coaching or someone who wants to be a mentee, you see the people who treat you with respect, who express their own vulnerability, and you can very quickly recognize who the right people are for you to coach. If you are not looking for a mentor, then you probably are missing out. And I think it's one of those things that in every case, especially early career people, but in more and more, I'm seeing late career people need mentors, need coaches more than ever,
Mm.
because different environments, you get caught up in your ways. And there's great research that's been done, by different groups around the years that a salesperson selling the same products to the same market for more than 2 years quite often see a dip in performance. And in that case, the net of it is they start to know everything. They start to anticipate the questions that customers are going to ask, and they're prepared to give them the answer before they ask the question. And they don't give people time to express what they're doing. And it's the same thing with coaching. If I don't give you time to tell me what's going on, if I don't explore and diagnose the problem like a doctor would, then my prescription, my recommendation is going to have very little meaning to you.
I think you're gonna be kind of surprised where my mind's going, but I'm gonna share another blog, and I didn't write this one. This is from Todoist, which is one of my favorite to-do list apps, and they did this comprehensive, incredible guide to mastery, right? And so where I was going with this is, is the purpose of all this coaching and all of this effort and work on yourself and work on your skills mastery? I would argue it is, and I think you kind of probably could see that coming because that's kind of like something I think I've shared with you before that I think is important and interesting, And I was just wondering what you thought of like the goal of coaching and like is it just to
Mhm.
get better, or is it to become truly a master? You know.
Well, I mean, I think let's define what mastery is, right? Let's
Mm.
define a master. The first thing that pops up in my mind is golf, right? The Masters, right? It's the pinnacle of golf tournaments. But it's not like one person goes in and wins that every year until they age out. Games get better, get worse, mental things happen, somebody else comes along and does something slightly differently. So you can be at the peak of your career, you can be, one of the best coders in the world, you can be a luminary in the field of DevOps. That doesn't mean that you know everything. And I don't know anyone that's ever been perfect. And so when you look at the skills that you need, even the best are still practicing. They're still working with coaches. They're still getting video analysis of their swing and having people tell them that, maybe you should, rotate your hips sooner, or you should go higher in your backswing. It's the same thing with, professional football, professional baseball. The hitting champion or the batting champion from last year, quite often doesn't repeat the next year, because your skill set changes over time and your environment changes over time.
I think that's a
So,
wonderful
you
answer.
know, yeah, I think it's tough to be the master of something.
It reminds me, this comes back up for me from directly when we worked together. And this is at Armory, the State of DevOps report for 2023 or whatever, whenever that was. They came out with new language that they're elite performers. You might remember this, right? And I think we tossed around the idea of using that language in our kind of marketing, right, initiatives, right? And so maybe mastery is just too kind of amorphous, and maybe it takes too much time. But maybe the goal of for any coaching effort is to get someone past the point where they're at to a higher level, which may or may not be elite. Does that strike you as like a okay way to approach it?
I think it's always, I even on my LinkedIn profile, I put constant learner,
Mhm.
right? The day that you stop learning, I think, is the day that you give up on being better and being the best in any activity. There's great research with a number of 10,000 hours, which is, to master a skill, it takes 10,000 hours of practice or 10,000 hours of doing something. And some of that comes from a great book called The 2-Second Advantage, which is one that I read many years ago. It goes into a lot of brain science, but also how we develop skills. And it was written by the co-founder of Tibco Software back in the day. And they use Wayne Gretzky as one of the examples. And growing up playing hockey, Wayne Gretzky was not the fastest. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the most accurate shooter. He wasn't the person you would think would be the GOAT of hockey, right? The greatest of all time in hockey. But most people will still say that he certainly was in his era, and could be arguably still be. And he said it's very simple. I don't think about where I'm passing the puck to the person. I think about passing the puck to where the person is going to be. Just that little bit of leading them. I know they're going to go this direction, so I'm going to pass to where they're going to be, not where they are. And I think that's true in everything we do. It's how do you anticipate the needs, whether that be the needs of a business organization, the needs of a particular application that you're working on as a developer or you're going to deploy. How do you anticipate where the problems might occur? And in coaching, it's the same way. In sales coaching, I want to coach early in the sales cycle, not late in the sales cycle. I want to coach in the very beginning, because if I'm giving them coaching then the rest of the things tend to fall in place.
So, I have to say, I think this idea of the Wayne Gretzky skating to where the puck is going to be really resonated with me, and I think it's going to be the focus. So this is going to have a corresponding blog or newsletter, accompanying it with the K8sKoach. And so, for me, I think my advice to any kind of newish or even mid career DevOps person or Kubernetes person is to take a survey of all the different cloud native computing foundation projects, and try and figure out where the puck is going. Try to figure out where the skills are going to be necessary, what they should be spending time in, because that 10,000 hours could very easily be consumed by just this broad kind of survey of all the different projects and trying to get your hands around all the different projects and trying to like understand those better and so forth. And I just wanted to say, this complete guide to mastery that I have on the screen. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to put it in the show links. It talks about the 10,000 hours. It does a wonderful job kind of articulating that 2 second advantage book, or Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. That was another one that really kind of focused on that concept. And but I guess, do you have any advice? I think I know the answer what you're going to say, but do you have any advice on skills, in the technology field to start looking at or learning, or trying to skate where the puck is? Like, where's your puck and where are you skating to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go way back to when I was in college, and you'll laugh at this. And people that don't have as much gray hair, either on their head or their face as I do, will may not even understand this reference. But when I was in college, in the late 1980s, my engineering degree required us to take one computer programming course. And the computer programming course that you were required to take for an engineering degree was Fortran.
Mhm.
It was a dead language at that
Then,
point,
yeah.
right? Look at as a programmer, as a developer, what are the dead languages now, right? I mean, how many people are actually really coding in C today?
Right.
Are people really building Java today? Some are, some aren't. But who's coding in COBOL or Perl, right? It's just not happening. Everybody's thinking about AI today, and how do I use AI? That's great, but the chances are, just like me deciding that I wanted to go right down the lasso way, somebody's already done it. Somebody's already figured that out. Somebody's already started working on it. So if you're thinking about where are you trying to focus, where do you want to talk to your mentors, think about where you're going to be in a year, 2 years. It's crazy in today's world to think about 3 or more years out. But the visionaries, the people who are really building the next generation of capabilities, are thinking that far out. And that's what I would be focusing on, is not where am I today? What skills do I need today? But what skills do I need, in 3 years?
Yeah, I think that's perfect, Mike. That's a great explanation. And you did kind of mention what I thought you were going to, and it's just, everyone's just so excited about AI, and they're just so interested in AI these days. But something I'm trying to, which will be a blog article, here on K8sKoach, is on building a second brain for Kubernetes learning, right? And then, like, how do you use it for coaching? But so I think I kind of need to define what that building a second brain refers to, right? And I think I mentioned it too in one of our previous conversations, but there's a book called Building a Second Brain, and it uses an acronym, and it's code. And so the acronym helps you organize, like codify and organize, and then extract all of this information about from your second brain. So it's really kind of like a long-term, like long-term storage for all of your Kubernetes learning. And so I'm working on how do you use the shell, the Z shell or the Bash shell to do that and so forth. But with this idea of a second brain for learning Kubernetes, how do you see there be, or do you have any ideas on how a coach could leverage that and help someone learn and help someone um, develop themselves and develop their skills, or even skate to where the puck is going to be? Like, I think I have an answer for that, but I was curious if you have any ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because you see these concepts come full circle over time. And the book that I mentioned, The 2 Second Advantage, really talks quite a bit about artificial intelligence and the idea of, can we ever truly replicate the human brain? And the idea of artificial intelligence in today's context is nowhere close to the human brain. In terms of, think about traumatic brain injuries and the ability of the brain to rewire itself around that injury, and continue to function. So, that the storage capability, and I love your concept. I've already ordered the Building a Second Brain book,
Oh, great.
because the idea of, first you have to capture this knowledge, right? How do I capture the knowledge? Well, I have to get that knowledge from somewhere. Now, chances are much of that knowledge exists out in the public internet, exists in manuals, it exists in training guides. But then I have to organize all that knowledge, right? So how do I put that knowledge into a way that it's, short-term memory, right? Or, RAM that I can get to very quickly. I've got to then be able to, I think your one calls it distill. In the 2 Second Advantage, they call it chunking. How do I take that knowledge that I've brought together and bring that into a higher order concept? And they use the example of learning to drive a car. If you think about the first time you ever sat down inside of the driver's seat of a car, you're nervous, you're checking everything out. You're like, okay, I've got my seatbelt on, to check the rear side view mirror, check the rear view mirror. Okay, hands on the wheel, foot on the brake. Okay, put the key in now. And you go through every individual component of that activity. After 10,000 hours of driving, you don't think about it at all. You get in the car, you drive away, you get to your destination, and half the time you don't even remember driving there, because your brain has distilled all of those details into a concept. And I think it's the same thing when you think about, Kubernetes, and how coders operate in this environment. People don't stop, when you've been coding for that many years, you don't stop and think about all the specific syntax of a particular coding language. It's just part of your knowledge base. But then ultimately, how do you express that knowledge, or how do you act on that knowledge? And that's where I think the coaching world really can change things. You can build that second brain where I've got all this information. It's easy for me to access. It's in a repository. I can use AI to ask it questions. But how do I act on that? And that's where I think we start seeing these higher order concepts of responsible and ethical AI, responsible and ethical coding. How do I act on that knowledge in a way that's going to put me ahead of my competition, put me ahead of other people in the industry, that's going to elevate me in my career? And coaches can impact that in absolutely every scenario, simply by understanding, what that person's goals are, what are they trying to accomplish, using your own experience, but also helping them to distill knowledge they already have into an actionable approach.
Yeah, I think that was a marvelous explanation, and I just wanted to say how much I appreciate it. And so, just to summarize, what you did not talk about were the four steps of the building a second brain, which the acronym is code, and it's collect, organize, distill, and then express, right? And I kind of am fascinated by the distillation aspect of it, right? Because that seems like a nice opportunity for AI. If you were to collect all this stuff together, and I'm sure you've had this experience, Mike, and then you run it through a generative AI and you say, summarize this, or tell me what the key points are, or tell me what the most important parts are, and then I've been surprised by that exercise. You get this feedback or these results. Like I ran my resume through a Gen AI, and I asked it to produce 5 words that kind of expressed who I am based on my resume, and it did a marvelous job, and then and that's at the header of my resume now. And so I think that distillation is particularly interesting. And then the express one I think is also equally as interesting because like, if you're this Kubernetes learner, what if you did start writing blogs, or what if you did start your own podcast or your own streamcast, or what if you did you know, uh, give like informal, like in person, like talks on various things that you're learning stuff, and you use that second brain to kind of fuel all that activity. I would argue that would be a pretty darn good learning experience. That just like early on in my career, I taught for a couple of years, and I found the act of teaching to be a tremendous, tremendous way to learn something because you have to synthesize it to such a degree to teach it to a novice, and then get them to learn it. It was a wonderful experience.
Well,
Um,
I think you just hit on a key point, Thomas, which is you understand what learning styles work for you.
Hmm.
right? And there's, just like the different types of coaching, there's different types of learning and understanding what type of learning works. Some people are social learners where they learn best in a group and they can talk through it and work through it. Other people are very solitary. Some people are very visual learners, some are auditory learners. And so understanding what learning style works best for you is really important. I, like you, I feel like I learn something the best when I teach it. And to me, that's why I love coaching, because I benefit from it. It's not a one-way interaction where I'm just sitting on my throne espousing wisdom in the Socratic
Mm.
manner, right? It's a relationship. It's an interactive, and I learn from that. I learn about myself, and I learn about the person, and I learn about the environment.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, I think my teaching style was a little bit Socratic, but it was not so much sitting on your throne as it was like, asking why, right? Why is the subnet like that? Why is it, like, why do we do it this way? Why, there's logic behind all the stuff in computer engineering. And so, getting to the why was always a really important question. And believe it or not, Mike, I found that to be a tremendous skill to have brought to the solution architecture field, asking why till it becomes uncomfortable, of a customer, like, why are you doing it that way? Why are you doing it that, you keep kind of digging down and forever until you get to the, Ed did it that way. Oh, okay. Well, Ed's not here anymore, so let's redesign this.
I think you
But
probably heard me say at least once, if not 10 times, if you treat customers like you're in kindergarten, right? Just ask why until they get tired of answering.
yeah, I think I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. I'm in that phase right now. So I get
Yep.
peppered with 100 whys a day, right? Yeah. But I just have to say, I think we covered everything I wanted to do today. We did a little bit faster than I was expecting, but I just wanted to say such a big thank you to you, Mike. You're the man, and I feel truly blessed to have you in my career and in my corner. And I just wanted to say thank you again.
Well, I think you doing this is a fantastic activity because again, you're taking that knowledge that you've given, you're passing it on. You're passing it on in a format that the audience today understands, resonates with. This podcast will live on forever, and hopefully someone will get some value out of it. And I think that that contribution that you're making is fantastic. So I'm honored that you allow me to be part of your environment, that you brought me onto the podcast, and thanks for some great times we've had and many times to
Yeah,
come.
many times to come. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much.
All right.